Hello, today is the 31st of August 2023, and today is the birthday of Patrik Schumacher, who runs now, who is the director of um, um, Zaha Hadid Architects, and I show some newer works by them. This is Patrik Schumacher. Happy birthday, sir. Here he is with Zaha, with a remarkable building by them, their office. This is one of their best works, in my opinion, a museum in the United States. Here they are again. As I said, Patrik was not initially liked by Zaha, but he became more and more indispensable to her. I love this picture of them. As you can see, younger, Zaha Hadid was younger, Patrik Schumacher was younger, and lots of books behind. Still determined to change the world. And if you don't have the desire to change the world, you better give up architecture. Because I don't think you can do anything great, even if, of course, changing the world is almost impossible. But you have to have the desire to do so, even if you know that you might not succeed. The Russian mega smart city, Zaha Hadid Architects working in collaboration with, anyway, I made this presentation before the start of the war. I personally am not very fond of this work. I find it flamboyant and uh, not in the best taste, but anyway, that's what they proposed about, I don't know, 8 years ago or so. This is a project in China. I hope I have here. It's a very fine YouTube, video that they created for this complex of buildings in China. Again, these are works that were done, projects that began, some of them while Zaha was still alive, and developed after she died at 65. She died at 65. What do we see here? Total fluidities and fluid totalities, to use the titles of two books that were published in Vienna at the Institute of Architecture by the studio run by Zaha Hadid for almost 20 years, with the works of international students, of whom 6 were Romanians, and they were published in the book I have, actually. Anyway, this is the work in China. I don't know exactly, maybe some kind of a cultural center. The influence of Patrik Schumacher on Zaha Hadid was increasingly substantial. 5 Zaha Hadid design projects still to be finished following the architect's death. Morpheus Hotel, which was finished in the meantime in Macau. It was built with the exoskeleton. The structure is at the periphery of the building. There are no columns at the interior of the building. I mean, can you do this in the absence of scripting and programming and parametric design? Of course not. Impossible. You can't even dream it. You cannot draw it. You have to have a very advanced digital knowledge in order to not to build, but even to draw something like this. A very fine work. Too bad that, yes, it is addressed to an elite. This is not for proletarians, but I guess beauty shouldn't be ideologized. Zaha Hadid and Patrik Schumacher, and of course the whole office. The work was finalized after Zaha Hadid died in Miami at 65. Macau Morpheus Hotel. again, someone might ask what justified or justifies those holes or those complexities, in the center of the building. Well, this is art. You cannot explain, or you could explain, but it's beyond the point, actually. Capriciousness and subjectivity is part of the artistic creation, and it always was. Well, she died when she was visiting the construction site of this building, 1000 Museum. It's not a museum, it's a opulent apartment building, very large, too explicitly phallic, in my opinion. But there are some good parts, of course, very expensive, all this concrete work, which also pollutes. But the buildings is still different from the left and the right buildings to an extent, formally at least. There are some dramatic parts here, which again, were very expensive and employing a lot of concrete, and concrete does pollute. Maybe her building is some kind of a, comment on the masculinity of the very idea of a skyscraper. I don't know. Maybe there is a subversive meaning in this building, and I hope it is. I'm not sure it is, but I hope it is. The Star architect, the Star was, I guess, the newspaper that published this Exoskeleton Tower, an instant Miami landmark. I am a little bit skeptical that she tried to comment through her building the masculinism of the other towers. I hope it is so, but I don't know. It's more wishful thinking from my side. But the building is more explicitly phallic than the other buildings, almost literally so. Anyway, for the rich and famous, for those who could afford here an apartment, which costs millions, with balconies where you could have 100 people partying, it's built. And she died while inspecting the building site here in Miami. Please don't expect proletarians to swim in this swimming pool. No. Financial speculators, yes, but not proletarians. Espera city center in Monterrey, Mexico, it says here in my presentation, opens in 2008. Then the pandemic came. I don't know if I never saw pictures of it being finalized. A high density residential building, the designer's first project in Mexico, comprises 981 flats and spans 9 stories at its highest point. It's actually like a complex of buildings. Look at them. Again, for an elite in a country which knows something about poverty as well. There are many people who live in poverty, but those people would never even dream of owning an apartment in these buildings by Zaha Hadid architects. This one, this Ellie and Edith Broad Art Museum in Michigan, USA, I like, because it's a smaller building, and it doesn't use explicit fluidities, meaning curves, but it's more connected, I would say, with the early work of Zaha Hadid, which was more angular. This is one reason why I like this building more than some other buildings by her and her office. And also the fact that it's not, oversized. I think it's a good building in Michigan by Zaha Hadid Architects. And I don't know if it was finalized only after her death. It seems so. Anyway, this is a video about this museum. Now, Beijing New International Airport in China, it opened. In my presentation, when I made it, it was estimated it will open in 2019. It already opened. to cope with growing outbound traffic. After a record 4 billion trips were taken by Chinese tourists. Anyway, China is building what is built as the world's biggest airport, unofficially called the Beijing International Airport, and it is huge, and I like it more during the construction. Designed to look like a phoenix spreading its wings, construction was delayed in December, I don't know what year, 2017, last year, when more than 200 tombs from the Qing dynasty were unearthed during construction. And this is the airport, which was built. It was very, very impressive during the process of erecting it. It's still impressive, and it is the largest airport apparently in the world. And there are so many, impressive and large airports. If something bothers me is the glittering, surface on which the billion tourists walk. Can you imagine an army of cleaning people would be needed to keep this shining floor still shining? I personally don't like the final result as much as I like the building during the construction, because at the end, everything is a little bit too white for my taste and too slick. But during the construction, this airport is out of this world, was out of this world. And now you'll see some images during the construction at the building site. These were, anyway, let's hope. Yeah. I mean, yes, a very expensive building, no doubt. But the complexity of the structure is breathtaking. And, what they were able to achieve in their office to create the project for this massive building. Look at this, just the steel structure of the roofing is unbelievable. Too bad it's not so visceral and so explicitly breathtaking and so provocative, even through its darkness in the final iteration. But I think even l'ingénieur Eiffel would have loved this very much if he saw it. This was a project, but it was realized later in Saudi Arabia, a metro station. Someone wrote, beautifully designed project, has all the distinctive trademark curves of a Hadid structure. For my taste, is a little bit rhetorical, if not demagogical. I mean, should a subway station look like this? I don't know. We also see the appearance of ornament. Ornament is very explicit here. In many of the later works of Zaha Hadid architects, ornament does appear. The project, it was built. I don't have the latest pictures. Again, in my opinion, too much whiteness and slickness at the interior. But this is something that surprises one when you think that Zaha Hadid claimed that she was looking for an architecture that was raw, vital, and earthy. Maybe it is vital to an extent, but it is not raw and it is not earthy. One North Master Plan in Singapore, it's a large plan for, this remained just a project. The Sound Wave Concert Hall by Zaha Hadid architects in Russia, it was not built, and I'm sure the war in Ukraine postponed the beginning of building it. It's possible they started, but when the war in Ukraine began, Zaha Hadid architects removed themselves from the from Russia. And so did Sir Norman Foster, but not Wolf Prix. He remained convinced that he built something for the people of Sevastopol and not for Vladimir Putin. That's how he justified the fact that he didn't turn his back on Russia after the war in Ukraine started. Anyway, I will not read this text now about this concert hall that the Russians applauded and were ready to build. They won the competition for it to be built. You know, the artistic director and principal conductor of this Ural Philharmonic Orchestra declared that for musicians, this new hall is crucial. It will be a musical instrument that brings the sound to life. And there are, of course, very sophisticated videos about it. And now we arrive at the very end of this short, imperfect presentation about Patrik Schumacher and Zaha Hadid architects, because I wanted to show this fragment from a presentation he made, where he arrived at the conclusion that modernity had certain, you know, epochal styles, as he called them. One was modernism, the other one he called parametricism, and subsidiary styles in modernism started for him with functionalism, organicism, rationalism, brutalism, metabolism, high-tech, and then there were two transitional styles, postmodernism and deconstructivism at the end of the 20th century, and then in the 21st century, parametricism with the subsidiary styles, foldism, blobism, swarmism, and tectonism. Too many isms for my taste. I am against systems in general, but today a student, Sebastian Cojocaru, suggested to have another subsidiary style, and that is the AI-inism, you know, meaning the artificial intelligence inism, I-nism. Yes, this you know, diagrammatic presentation of the history of modern architecture was made by Patrik Schumacher a few years ago. It is very possible that if he updated it to our day, he would have added at least another one, and that one might have been INIS, meaning the arrival of artificial intelligence. Very optimistic about parametricism, indeed. He uses the word style, which to me is problematic in itself. But he saw that at the beginning of history, we had vernacular architecture. Well, kind of quickly, he arrives at Renaissance, Baroque, Classicism, Historicism, and then on this double axis, order and freedom. So apparently, he wanted to say that in the Baroque, and there was more order than or no, the other way around. No, freedom is the horizontal axis, and order the you know, the vertical one. Although here he seems to suggest that freedom, the more we move towards parametricism, the more freedom increases, so it goes up. So we see in this you know, line, he identifies the Baroque as having approximately high. It's a little bit confusing for me because, you know, I guess he wanted to say that the Baroque had a certain degree of freedom, although in my opinion, the vernacular architecture had more freedom than classicism. So I'm a little bit confused. Does he try to say that, or maybe he wants to say that as we move towards from the back of history, from prehistory towards the present, we move towards freedom, but we have the various degrees of order. The constructivists had very little order. That was his claim, and it makes sense. Modernism had a little bit of order, had a little bit of freedom. So as we move towards freedom, parametricism, he claimed, also moves towards order. So it's both freedom and order. I don't know. I mean, this is his conception. But we could contemplate and we could discuss this diagram with the tension between order and freedom, or we could find other two opposite pairs. And Tectonism, as you saw here, this was supposed to be the latest arrival on the scene of architecture as a subsidiary style before the arrival very recently of the artificial intelligence. And as examples of Tectonism, I think he realized that excessive whiteness and excessive lack of texture and excessive slickness is detrimental. So he correctly, I would say, found some parallelisms and even inspiration in Gothic architecture. So parametricism could emulate the imagination of the architects, as long as they do not forget tectonics. And tectonism refers to tectonics, materiality. This is a work, in my opinion, one of the best works where the influence of Patrik Schumacher was appreciable, but at that time Zaha lived. It's a massive work, very fluid indeed, and very well kept under control. We remember the diagram, moving towards freedom, but also moving up in terms of order and disorder, if you want. It's a mega structure that contains all kinds of functions. It's amazing how they, how they made this possible, how they made this, the project itself to be crystallized. Again, I think it's a deficiency of their architecture that the interior is so without anything raw or earthy. In other words, without anything that Zaha Hadid claimed that were her main interests, to be raw, earthy, and vital. But otherwise, the building is amazing in its. It's not about the scale that is so impressive. Of course, the scale as well is the fluidity of the whole building. In Seoul, in South Korea. I take these images from Arch Daily, and they are very rigorous. They give a lot of drawings, but these drawings are a little bit too clean for my taste, too correct, and they tire me off after a while. Anyway, the building is impressive from many points of view, and yeah, it was built by these adventurous architects, Zaha Hadid, Patrik Schumacher, and their whole office, 400 and something innovative, creative, ambitious, talented, knowledgeable architects. Bravo to them. Well, maybe I can subtract from that bravo to them a little bit when you consider how much concrete they use here. And yes, concrete pollutes. Maybe in 2014 there wasn't so much talk about pollution, but that talk started to happen not much later. Too bad that this white glittering slickness is somehow in contradiction with the very idea of creating a building that is, a vortex of energies. I'm surprised they didn't realize this, that this whiteness is conceptually in contradiction with the whole idea of a new architecture that they try to promote. I visited the library Zaha Hadid architects built in Vienna, and it's the same. Inside, excessively white and smooth and slick. What is this in Beijing tower? This was built after she died. Just as you see, it was built. China. I wonder what Mao would have thought of it. Would probably die for a second time. Too much glass, if you ask me, too much air conditioning, but the demagogy of glass still claims its victims, and we are the victims, and the electrical bills are the consequence. I guess these people can pay those electrical bills. Again, during the construction, I think the building is more convincing than the final, the finalized work, in my opinion. Exactly because it has a level of rawness or roughness, which in the final built work is absent, and certainly from the outside. A phallic presence, although cut in two somehow. As with our Macau project, they wrote, it is important that the mega atrium is not a hermetic space, but also visually connects with the surrounding urban fabric. This reduces vertigo and enhances the sensation of freedom. Entering this space delivers a viscerally uplifting experience reminiscent of the tallest Gothic cathedrals. This too is in architecture's power. And what is this in Wuhan? That is before the pandemic. Apparently, the pandemic started there, right there in that city, Wuhan. So Patrik Schumacher on high intensity urban order, he wrote about this, and he gave us as examples. This building and similar buildings. I don't think he believes too much in rurality and in the village. And I'm not sure if Rem Koolhaas does either, although he staged the mega show at the Guggenheim Museum some years ago about the importance of the village or rurality. But what kind of a rurality could you have, when you are serving clients like Prada? What does Prada have to do with any village in the world? Zaha Hadid architects to build Tower C at Shenzhen base, super headquarters base. My God, another project that was initiated after Zaha Hadid died. Personally, I am a little bit turned off by the splendor of these towers, which celebrate what actually celebrate in essence the arrogance of Anthropos. Yes, it is impressive in a way that humans like me and you were able to conceive and even draw, visualize this, and they would be are able to build it. But in essence, it's a celebration of capitalism and a dubious joie de vivre while we know very well that the climate change is real, we know that the icebergs are melting and the levels of the seas are rising. So not everything is right in their architecture, in my opinion. And the poor trees, they are tolerated, so to speak, in the, on a certain floors, up to a certain level, that, being forced to grow out of concrete slabs instead of growing from the earth. But Patrik Schumacher does stress, and this is important, I think, that ornament and structure are not separate. And I wrote it a few times actually, but maybe once is enough. Ornament and structure are not separate. Thank you. And happy birthday, Patrik Schumacher.